Greetings everyone, this is Question GM. So I just want to take some time off from my prep quest videos just to make a few videos about my current experiences with the games that I've been running. And if some of you have been following my quest logs, you will know that I'm actually currently in a year. I'll be spending the rest of the year just to run a new game every month, although that has been chosen to be an elusive goal. But I just wanted to make a video for each game that I managed to run, and maybe some of my experiences and some of my thoughts about the game that I'm running in question. And these videos will probably be just collected thoughts and maybe just a bit of an open journal in terms of how I felt what attracted me to the game, how I felt when I was reading through it, and maybe some of my likes and dislikes with the system, and more of my experiences was when I was running the game for my group or for some other players, and maybe some final conclusion thoughts on what I plan to do with the system in the future, and what do I think about it overall in terms of a very limited but still valuable experience with the system. So this video is going to be the first game that I ran for 2019 that was part of this ongoing project for the rest of the year. It's by a game by the name of called Axon Punk Overdrive, and all these videos that I'm making will be based off a rule set that is the quick version of that particular rule set. I don't think I will ever have the time to actually dedicate myself to learning an entire core rules within a month and be able to run it. So that's not the intention of why I'm doing this series. It's just more of just to see what's out there, and just to have a quick feel about it and move on to the next thing. So Axon Punk Overdrive, you can find this in the Drive-Thru RPG. It's available. The quick start version of it is available for free, and you can just download it and just have a feel. And what drew my attention towards Axon Punk Overdrive when I first saw it, out of a whole list of other quick starters that I already have, is that it was number one. It was set in a cyberpunk setting, so there was definitely a genre that I've been interested in. As a media, I've enjoyed stories like Ghost in the Shell, especially. There were a few others. Unfortunately, I can't really say that I've watched all the Blade Runners yet, except for the latest one. But it was definitely a genre that I've really had an interest in terms of playing or running at the same time. So Axon Punk is set in a setting of it's a near future sort of thing where cybernetics has become rampant. It's available on market and off market, and the whole world has turned into a typical cyberpunk dystopia, but in the sense that where the world is sort of separated into corporate zones and corporate sectors and civilian zone. There is this whole entire big disparity between the rich and the poor. There is oppression by the law. There are obviously seedier underparts of the world that also try to make their own living and try to live in an entirely different political and legal climate and economical climate of the current situation in the world. So Cyberpunk Axon Overdrive is sort of built on the premise that you are actually a bunch of you all belong to a community. You could be a hacker, you could be an AI, you could be an engineer, you could be a cyborg, you could be a street merc, and you all belong to a community, and it's up to you guys to sort of protect the community, and it's also the community has their own interests that will send the players off to complete, and their livelihood depends on how well the community does. So that's the general premise of Axon Punk Overdrive, and how does it play? It's actually, from what I understand from the designers, is that they have actually based their design off Powered by the Apocalypse, but then they eventually decided to create their own system overall, and it runs basically on a D100 system, and there are some reroll mechanics alongside, and it kind of, I know I'm not saying that I've experience with the basic role playing game, but it basically feels like it's sort of has some fundamentals in the basic role playing game. D100 percentile sort of stats, and but it heavily depends on a lot of improvisation in terms of what the characters can do. And that brings me up to the first thing that I actually liked about Axon Punk Overdrive in terms of the system. It's a demonstration for me in understanding that you can actually be a very free reign, incentivizing improvisation as a system. Uh, but at the same time, giving or at least putting some parameters or framework to how far the players can take that improvisation to, which is actually very useful for GMs because they know sort of what to allow, where is the line between allowing something and not allowing something outright unless the players do a bit more work or build towards achieving what they want. And the other thing is that the rules within Axon Punk explicitly states that when a player decides to do something, they have to number one dictate their intention or slash objective, and then the second step is to actually tell the GM what is their approach, and then only the GM decides whether whatever they want to do requires a dice check or not. So I think that's something that's sort of a good practice and good habit, especially coming from Dungeons and Dragons as a background. That's more often than not, it's very difficult for a GM to adjudicate. Even whether the check requires a dice check. Number one, what is the appropriate DC? Number two, and then deciding what would be the proper failure and success consequences that comes after the dice check. So I think with by knowing what the intentions and the approach is, it gives a lot more clues and it gives a lot more leads to the GM to really adjudicate all those decisions, and finally make a call and just and see where the dice rolls. And one other thing that I sort of really liked, coming from that understanding of the rules, is that all these rules, all the explanation of rules within the Axon Punk Overdrive quick start, is all just compacted up to like just about 4 or 5 pages, and that's because the whole rules is sort of like summarized into cheat sheets, and you could basically just understand the entire system of the game by running up by just using those cheat sheets and supplementing that with the pre-gen character sheets that comes with the quick start. I'll get into the pre-gens later on, but let me just get back to about the setting and the premise of the game itself, and how the quick start really sort of explains it. And the interesting part, even though this is a 50-page quick start, a good amount of the pages are actually dedicated into explaining the world, and giving a lot of the feel of the system, of the setting, and which is something I really appreciate. And especially they do give like they actually do tell you what were their inspirations and what were their references in making the game. And most of it was there was a lot of hip hop influence, more of the culture rather than the music, but although at the same time they also do refer to some typical cyberpunk literature or media that also it helps to inform each of the so-called classes, or in the terminology of Axon Punk is the lifestyles. So that every page that describes each lifestyle has a good block of description, followed by the references and the examples that are found in common / popular media of which character adheres close to the lifestyle. And I actually like the choice of word of lifestyle in the context of in the context of the setting, in the sense that it's not really hard, and it's not as hard as sounding as class, although in essence and mechanically speaking it's pretty much that, but it sort of gives an implication to the players that this is the lifestyle they have chosen to play their character as. And although I don't exactly know if there's such a way in the full mechanics for players to hop between lifestyles, I doubt so, given how the lifestyles are described. But I think it's a more suiting a more suitable choice of words to use in a more cyberpunk context or setting. Uh, so the pages goes on, the early pages goes on talking about setting, talking about the lifestyle, and it goes into a little bit of the actual the community itself, how it's structured, and they actually give you a sample community that you will be using uh, for the pre-gen mission that comes with it, which is all fine, and not a surprising amount of material that I wasn't expecting to read from a quick start, but much appreciated in any case, because it really helped to immerse me into the world, and it really sort of fired up all the possibilities that I could actually put inside the world. But at the end of the day, it's about coming down to how does the setting interject or uh, work well with uh, the system itself. And the next point I'll be talking about would be the system, which I explained that it's very brief, it's very simple, it's just a D100 at your appropriate modifiers. If you want to do a reroll, you can do an exhaustion token, and if you have too much exhaustion tokens, your subsequent dice checks will be penalized. Uh, and they have this basic ideas of they have this basic system which is called the improvisation in the rhythm, and if you work in rhythm with other players, you actually get benefits to you can actually decide which if you go into rhythm with other characters, all of you can make the same dice check and decide which and use the more better one out of the other dice rolls. And if you're trained in rhythm, you actually get more bonuses when doing rhythm checks, as opposed to not being trained in the particular skill that you're not in the skill that you're not trained. And I think improvisation here is also the main one of the main engines that run the system, in the sense that the system isn't really very hard and fast on what you can do and what you can't do. Most of it is all improvised, and it's a negotiation between player and GM of using using arguments and justifications to say, if my character wants to do this, would you allow it, or what would it cost, or what would happen if I had to do this. And depending on which lifestyle that the players take, there is a certain area where the lifestyle is very good at, and therefore they're quite I would say the GM is more likely to allow the player to perform an improvisation that falls within their character lifestyle improvisation. And this is both a very free form way of this is a very interesting way of controlling the free form play style. And I guess I kind of like that from a system perspective, because it's not too conditional or not too procedural, especially compared to something like D&D, and it's really about the dynamics between player and GM, and not so much about mastery of the rules, in the sense that there's not much to master really. It's about getting the right effect in terms of story or in terms of gameplay, of what the players want to do, and just going through the GM for it. Okay, so that therefore brings me into the lifestyles I explained, and all the interesting lifestyles that are available. Your typical engineer, your typical cyborg, your typical street merc who's like the streetwise guy. And the hacker, obviously. The one that I was very fascinated was the AI lifestyle, in the sense that the players actually playing an actual AI, and she only sort of exists within within the net, like as in the internet, which brings a very interesting dynamic that I've never really expected to see fully implemented in a cyberpunk world, but it's really something that has a lot of interesting implications with. Is that in the sense that this is one character that is always constantly separated from the flesh and biological characters, and so she can only sort of interact with the players through any terminals or internet forms, and at the same time, only the AI is the only one that can perform certain things that's allowable in her digital binary form. And this is something that really this is something that I like part that comes with the setting. And it's something that I really thought about and felt that this is an interesting challenge as a GM to how do you juggle a player who is always in a constant state of separation from the players, and how she can influence the in-game play, or how she actually can interact or cooperate with the players when they are not on the same plane of existence in so to speak. And because of that, it actually brings up a lot of interesting possibilities and interesting way of designing or looking at the adventure, making adventures itself in the world of Axon Punk. And I will have to say the character sheets are actually very good looking. They look very pretty, and the informations there is all the lifestyle is all stated out very clearly. The only complaint that I will probably have is that there are things that were mentioned inside the character sheet that doesn't have any sort of description, especially when it comes to the gear and the equipment. So without any sort of guide to interpreting what this equipment can do, it's really sort of just off the top of the head of letting the items be self-explanatory in its own way, and which can be challenging, especially when it comes to certain equipment that may be a little bit potentially game breaking in its own way. And in contrast to having the rights, having the proper parameters in understanding how improvisation works, not having any parameters for this equipment just sort of like an outlet for some really uncontrolled chaos for GMs to really control and see what are the actual capabilities of the players. And I would say that the character sheet, despite how pretty it looks, there are definitely some places where things could be a bit more clearer, and there's a lot of repetition of information that may end up confusing player and GM alike sometimes at certain points. And there's also the problem that there are some skills, or in Axon Punk terminology it's called training, that is not explained as well, which I thought that should have been part of the in the quick start, just to explain exactly what are all the components in the character sheet. But there are definitely some components that are not explained found in the character sheet, which I found was a little bit disappointing and a bit annoying, that I wasn't able to fully explore the capabilities of those components, since it was difficult to make a decision on what do they exactly do. All right. So, and lastly, I'll come into the Preemie adventure itself. Now, the Preemie adventure itself on paper actually looks pretty straightforward and simple, but given how they did the scene setting in a way, it was actually very easy. It was actually very easy to go off the rails, because they realized there's a heavy emphasis on letting the players decide what to do, but at the same time, the material provided only goes in a certain direction. So obviously, when I was doing my running of Axon Punk, it easily just went off the rails as quick as the first scene, and maybe that's part of the idea, in the sense that they don't want to sort of shoehorn the players into a certain direction because of the improvisation nature of the game. But at the same time, that can actually be detrimental to especially how the pre-gen was written. So as a quick start, I would say it offers some it has a solid start, although there are definitely some pitfalls that really hurt the value and experience of the quick start itself. Number one is the adventure. Number two is the pre-gen isn't perfect, despite how good it looks, and I felt that there was a lot of space sort of that could have been spent to do other things, rather than dedicated into whatever areas they are right at the moment. Now, would I run Axon Punk in the future? My group has been a little bit on the not so sure side. They lean towards yes, but I feel that we are not getting the full experience of Axon Punk, And that's not to say that in a sense that we are not the experience wasn't complete in a way, because that's what the quick start is for. It's just to give a small taste. But because of the gaps that were left in the quick start, it actually makes it more like it becomes a bit more risky in the sense that I have to buy the actual full game in itself to get the entire game, which I felt that as a quick start, you're supposed to give like the base of the game, the entire base of the game, and the options are provided further in the complete book. But even at a quick start level, it's not really giving me the base that I need to make a good decision on. And to be in all honesty, the setting of Axon Punk Overdrive is pretty much generic in a way that it's not so tight. It's not so strongly tied to the system, that I could have just taken the ideas from the Axon the setting and just sort of plant it into a more friendlier system, or a more preferred system in terms of the cyberpunk genre. So it's quite a shame really, because I kind of do enjoy the aesthetic of Axon Punk, but the quick start doesn't really sell it well enough for me to really want to plop in the additional money to get the entire experience. Although it definitely fall into one of those like wish list kind of thing, like I may one day want to do it, but I'm not giving myself any kind of pressure to run the entirety of Axon Punk Overdrive, which is a real shame in my book, because the quick start really started off in a very good direction, but just sort of I felt that maybe it felt like the designers didn't really capitalize on selling the whole system. This felt more like a byproduct of something else, of the system itself maybe, and it suffered for it. I felt it suffered for it in that way. So yeah, I guess that's all for my thoughts for now for Axon Punk. Generally overall good, interesting setting, a setting that I really like. Um, a very interesting system. It has some good concepts that I would definitely want to see more of, or probably like steal. Uh, but it's more of the content of the quick start itself that really lets it down. And even for myself, after running the pre-gen adventure once with my group, I definitely thought of ways that I could actually just make my own pre-gen adventure that would utilize the characters and the system more than was provided. And yeah, I guess I can't kind of understand that it's difficult to make a pre-gen adventure, but I hope designers do realize that how vital the pre-gen adventure is to their quick start and the success, because if they can get the quick start right, you are definitely seeing sales that follows afterwards. So I feel that you don't try to put a bit more attention to making your quick start. I would say in this case, Axon Punk really does sort of sell itself short in its potential. So yeah, so would I recommend Axon Punk Overdrive? I would say go straight for the core book, and you can get like the complete book, I think, for $15 US. I think you pay like a $5 more, you can come in with a bundle that comes with like an anthology of fiction that definitely would be very useful as fodder and ideas for playing more in the system and getting to know the setting better, and that leading to more ideas. So that's all for my thoughts for Axon Punk Overdrive. I'll be back with my next video to talk up, which is for my next game, and we'll keep that surprise for now. So this is the Question GM signing out for now, and bye.